Welcome to Pocket with your host Kiara, and in this episode, we'll be looking at the relationship between the informal economy and formal businesses. The direction of this pocket is to understand the context in which we see the informal trading community and its bigger relationships with macroeconomics as their suppliers and the communities or networks they insert themselves in, which I think is an interesting opportunity to discuss these relationships. This episode's guest is an individual who entered the retail space as a sales worker and worked his way up in the sales industry to now a management position. So thank you for being here today, Tobias, and welcome to Pocket. The activities of small-scale enterprises or informal businesses leverage on the formal sector through distribution of wholesale products, and so the informal economy is intertwined with formal retailers. How do macroeconomic trends impact small-scale economies, and what are the types of examples of these relationships?
Macroeconomic trends can have a significant impact on small-scale economies. If you look at inflation and interest rates, everybody has a little bit of a pinch right now in terms of their pockets, and this goes for businesses as well. And how that impacts the small scale economies is that where they could have sort of more leverage to buy a bit more of stock for their businesses, to support the community, that comes a bit tighter. The ripple effect of this is that they then get drilling down deeper into our pricing, and at the end of the day that impacts profits. So once these trends hit, from the inflation and the interest rate aspect, we're starting to see profits going on a decline. The other thing is consumer behavior. If we go back to 2019 with the COVID-19 or 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, and everybody moving to a tech space in terms of grocer or online buying, that sort of impacts their business as well. Might not be at a large scale, but it could pose a challenge for them in years to come, where technology is sort of finding its way deeper into the small scale economy and seeing how they can leverage off that market. So they can have a significant impact on these markets, and I think it's up to business owners in that space to take the opportunity to see where they can leverage of being small scale. The other aspect of it is because the interest rates are on a spike in inflation, access to funding might become a problem for them. The cost of borrowing money might also be a problem for them, and that's unfortunately what in many cases what is required for them to grow their business. That it could impact them.
So, in your opinion, what role do you think small-scale economies play in the overall health and stability of an economy?
I think it plays a vital role. Sometimes we don't understand the opportunity and the potential that these small-scale economies have for businesses. And it goes over and above just the buying or the trading and whatever the case may be between small-scale economies and the larger corporate businesses out there. There is immense talent that lies in the small-scale economies. If you look at innovation, a lot of business startups are coming from small-scale economies. If you look at the market from a consumer perspective, there is immense population that lies in these small economies, and that trade or that share of the pie in the bigger retailers is a very high percentage. So the small economies are very important for, I think, across all industries, and the health of our economy and the stability of our economy.
So a lot of the time, these economies are described as survival economies. Like people have their startups, they work with what they have, but they also operate on very localized scales and lower income communities that provide businesses with business opportunities, which expands on the job market for unskilled workers. So how do you think these small-scale economies contribute to job creation and economic growth at local levels that you see bigger businesses are falling short on?
So small-scale economies and the contribution to job creation. When we look at the economy itself, the small-scale economy as job creation that's starting from within that community. The mundane jobs of the everyday retailer, bystander, the fruit and veg guys, or what do you call them? The street vendors. These local wholesalers and the local taverns and shebeens and all of those that's within the small scale economy that sort of has the jobs that's suited for its immediate community. So I think for itself it's vital as well, not just on a bigger scale, but if you look at the bigger scale, the amount of employment that comes from the small scale economies into the bigger corporate landscape is vital for our businesses. I know that there are businesses out there that unfortunately not everybody passes matric, but there is job opportunities for that small population, and it's the small scale economy that contributes to those companies. That could be a startup that's looking for entry level employees to sort of build on, to educate and to learn and to grow their skills within their business, So I think they're vital for both within their community and outside of their community.
Okay. So earlier on, you spoke about challenges with accessing funding, but what are the other challenges for small-scale economies in accessing capital, resources, and markets? How do you think these things can be addressed?
It boils down to how we're getting the knowledge out into the small-scale economy. How are we reaching the business owner that's looking to expand? There's many ways to skin a cat when it comes to this. So you have your general bank loans that you can go apply for. But what we've come across as very challenging within the informal sector is, paperwork. There's no filing system in place. So, the necessary paperwork might not be available at hand. That's obviously one of the requirements when applying for financing with the more formalized sector of capital and whatever the case may be. But there's many institutions out there that offer capital for small businesses. But at the end of the day, it's us as the corporates that should be getting into that space and saying these are the options that you have at hand. There's companies that are opening up that's specifically focused on the informal sector, trade, financing, and I think it's our responsibility to have that shared value, to educate them, to say that this option does lie on the table, this is what is required. And should they be successful in that, which I think they stand a better chance than going to the formal banks, at the end of the day, it will hopefully result in sales going into the business and growth into their business. And it might not be just for trading. I know there's companies out there that you can have access to the funds and use the funds for developing your business in terms of construction. So you don't have to particularly buy stock from the retailer that gave you that opportunity, and it's that shared value in the sense that I'm here to assist you as your supplier. This is how you can access funds to develop your business, whether it be with stock, with the ability to hire more employees, with the ability to renovate your business, and at the end of the day, we don't really expect anything back, but we hoping that will sort of build that trust relationship and that loyalty with the company.
Okay. So are there any specific industries or sectors where these economies have a particularly strong impact on macroeconomy?
Yeah, the main one I would say, just in my opinion or based on my experience, I would say the retail industry is probably one of the most largely impacted in terms of the macroeconomy, both from a workforce perspective, and also from the trade itself. In terms of B2B opportunities that are lying within the macro or within the small scale economies. So retail definitely has a large impact of it. Within including over and above retail, I would say these smaller workforce companies that have these recruitment drives and have a mass population or a group or pool of employees that's sitting looking for opportunities. So in that scale, I think they also have a large impact on recruitment, I would say, and finding jobs for our people. And obviously you can I can only assume in the agriculture space as well, in terms of the amount of employees, possibly the mining sector as well. I think uh, I think the thing is, from the small scale economy is where you got the workforce, where people aren't afraid to get their hands dirty, to get the job done. Um, it might sound wrong, but I don't mean it in any way. But it is what it is. That's from my experience. Is that they get their hands dirty, whether it's construction or mining or whatever the case may be. So they have a large impact on any industry where it's hard labor, sort of, in my opinion.
Okay. So the identity of like smaller businesses, especially in like lower income communities, are built on social relationships. So beyond the sale of goods, but like how embedded they are in their communities, which creates a stronger sense of community building and familiarity to understand what their neighborhood needs are. So how do you think, or how do you establish relationships with these people in the informal economy as a supplier to build trust and keep that relationship ongoing?
There needs to be, like I said earlier on, there needs to be shared value in the relationship. Whether it be with the ordinary customer that walks into my store to buy the loaf of bread and milk and a couple of groceries, or the informal trader that either has a liquor establishment or food trading, whatever the case may be. I think fundamentally it's built on trust, with the informal sector, and over and above that, it's that shared value. So if I'm coming to your business, I should be seeing a benefit at the end of the day. And even though the small scale economy or the informal sector, they run the business just like any other person would run their business. They understand and have immense knowledge and capabilities of running those businesses. They understand the power of buying. You will see in certain areas where you'll have multiple wholesalers or smaller shops that would branch together to create the buying power to drive the price lower where they would buy stock. So it's built on trust. It's built on the shared value that is between us as a supplier and them as a customer. The guy that walks into the store that buys the loaf of bread, he wants to always have the loaf of bread available. He wants to be treated like any other customer, irrespective of his background. And I mean, that's what we strive for. So yes, there is an understanding where the business is coming from and where the customer comes from, but they want to be treated just like everybody else. And I think, but that's definitely one of the things that we got to take to our customers, irrespective of their background and where they're coming from. We got to respect them as business owners, and we are there to supply them the best service, the best products, the best pricing that we are possibly able to do, irrespective of where they're based.
So you spoke about these business owners coming together, but a lot of the times there's a lot of the same businesses in one area and it becomes monotonous. Do you think that increases competition? How do you think they would like work around that?
Definitely, it does increase competition. We see it with every day street vendors. If you go into the informal trade, literally 10 or 20 meters apart, you've got 5 or 6 different street vendors selling the same items. It's difficult to break into that market with something new. We tried many times to introduce certain lines, either coming from our home or house brand or private label brand. But at the end of the day, we found that the consumers within the informal sector buy most of the time the items that they know, and that they've been buying for many years. So for the traders that's operating within that space, it's very difficult to differentiate themselves from the next person, out of the fear that, look, I don't have the capital to take this risk to differentiate myself. What if I don't sell that items? So it's easier to fall back on what is working for the next person. Let me also try my luck at it. Even if you look at your liquor establishments, where they differ themselves is the setup. They differentiate themselves in terms of events, guest DJs, having different sort of services. Like you might have a Shisanyama there with the car wash. Those are the things that they try, but you can't really differentiate much when it comes to liquor. If there's a certain beer that is popular at the time, everybody's going to be drinking it. If there's a certain cider or spirit that they're drinking at the time, everybody's going to buy into that. It's just about how can I differentiate my offering from a service perspective to the consumer. And if it comes down to the everyday street vendor, that is very difficult. There's not much that they can do different. And I think that's why you see a lot of them have that outgoing personality. They want to get in your face because they want to draw you in, say, come and buy from me. So I think it boils down to the owner, whoever's running that business in that moment. That is how they differentiate themselves, because they know I'm selling the same thing as the 3 other guys next to me.
Okay. So there's a lot of separation of the informal economy and isolating the activities with illegal connotations, unsafe, illegal, destroying sidewalks and communities. And yes, sometimes it is true. And government is continuing the discussions around formalizing the informal sector to integrate it with the formal. And as this economy is continuing to grow, regardless of policies, competition, even harassment from law enforcement, many people decide to enter the informal market on the basis that this business is fluid. It produces business ventures with the freedom to operate within a context that is not considered conventional or acceptable within the formal sector. But do you think that the informal economy should be integrated?
Yeah, look, I don't think it should be integrated to a point where we're forcing the heavy regulations down onto the informal economy. Like you're saying, that economy is known to be agile, and I think by them being agile, they're able to adapt to change within their community faster. By them adapting to that change, it sort of has that continuity of their business. What I think we should be doing is learning and educating both the formal economy and the informal economy, and finding ways that we sort of create an ecosystem where both parties can benefit. You see that happening a lot in the retail space. But which other sectors can we sort of move into that can benefit from the informal's agility on their trade, and coming possibly with our, as a formal economy, with our backing in terms of financing and capital and initiatives and drives. How do we partner with the guys within the informal economy to reach the greater population, to reach further into the communities, to establish strong relationships for the growth of that economy. I think that's what we should be focusing on. It shouldn't be integrated to a point where we're sort of hindering them from being the business that they currently are, which is thriving. Yeah.
So what would you say is your challenges with adapting to fast changes compared to the informal economy?
I think with the bigger corporate or formal economy, because we have so many processes and policies in place which are there for a reason, but sometimes your process and policy can sort of hinder creativity, innovation, or intuition, in certain circumstances. Where I'll give you a silly example, but you'll find a company struggles to deliver to a certain area because of infrastructure. And let's say there's a quick development of an informal development there that gets erected and people move in, and there's businesses there now that's running from an informal trade, and then there's a supply within the community. The difference is they will make a plan as quick as possible to service that community because that's an opportunity for them. But there's things that prohibit us. My vehicles might not be allowed to go in there. From a risk perspective, we've got to go do an analysis and understand, is there loadings, is there all of those aspects of the route, So I think because we have these processes, sometimes we find ourselves to be a bit more rigid to that change, where they have that agile approach to things, and they're willing to take the risk in that sense, to sort of be the first in there, And I mean, there's even bigger companies out there that are actually becoming a bit more aware of that situation. I know there's a e-commerce or e-grocer on-demand solution that's based in Namibia. That business is completely catered for the informal sector, and they believe that they're going to areas where their competitors can't, and they have that thing I was talking about, how can we work together in growing their business. At the end of the day, it grows my business, So it comes down to marketing. They're able to brand the stores. They're able to give them nice signage within their stores in terms of the, creating like a sort of an informal CI for them with products and brands and whatever the case may be. So they educate them in terms of buying and pricing and all of those things, And that's how that company is thriving. They saw the opportunity in the informal sector that most of the bigger formal guys are struggling to get into in that deep.
Okay. So you're speaking of pricing, and a lot of big retailers have competitive pricing with one another, and a lot of the times we see people compare their grocery baskets on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and how it changes from one store is cheaper. But often street traders who sell vegetables or spaza shop owners have products that are cheaper and more affordable to lower earning populations. Do you think this is clever marketing or price competition from the informal economy?
I wouldn't say it's clever marketing. I think it comes down to in the informal sector, they have products that was sourced at the cheapest price point, that they could make as much profit on it, but is catered for the immediate community. For example, a box of Itzamos, which is considerably a very expensive biscuit for any household, Let's just look at ordinary biscuits. So Itzamos is quite expensive if you look at all the biscuits. But you wouldn't find a box of Itzamos, at the street vendor. You're gonna find a plastic with a couple of biscuits inside. You don't know where those biscuits came from. They came from somewhere, maybe someone's house. I've seen there's retailers or cash and carries out there that have these massive bags of biscuits. I'm sure that's where they're coming from, right? but they don't sell it in that volume. They go get the best price for that big bag, put it into a smaller packet, because why? It's suited for my community. It's and I think it, like I'm saying, I don't think it's a marketing strategy or price competition. I think they just have their product mix that is personalized for their immediate market around them.
So you mentioned earlier on when you're speaking about the biscuits and buying bulk of products. So even when you do grocery shopping, like you don't buy all of your groceries from one store. Like very few people will do that. So how often do you see these small business owners come back to you to buy stock? Is it consistent? Is it on and off?
It boils down to what at the end of the day what the benefit is. I wish that we were in an age where consumers or businesses are loyal to a point where it's not about the price. But because everything has become so expensive, we've got an increase of rate and inflation, like I said, it boils down now to pricing. We only hope that we can have that loyal customer that would walk in and is willing to spend R2 or R3 extra per a case of something that they buy from us to resell. But unfortunately, in these times are tough outside, and any business person is looking for the cheapest, best quality products to maximize their profits. You can look at the external factors like load shedding that impacts businesses, and all of these costs are just piling on, and it's becoming a bit more difficult for the everyday trader to maintain that consistent profit. What works for them is that they sort of have a low cost base model. They don't have that much expenses besides buying of stock. But there are customers out there from the informal trade that you will see every day, and those are the guys that has that very strong relationship with either the manager within the store or the rep, whatever the case may be. We do see those customers coming in frequently. It can be daily, it can be twice a week, 3 times a week. But in this day and age, it boils down to who has the best price out there, and that's where my business is gonna go.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. Any last words?
No, thank you for having me on the show. I wish you nothing but the best. Very insightful from my side and very thought-provoking questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are connections and parallels between the formal and informal economic sector. In many ways that the informal economy provides empowerment, salaries, and a workplace, there is a gap that spaza shops, for example, fill in these communities. And we spoke about the abilities to reach these communities to an extent that bigger retailers cannot. And regardless of how we try to isolate economic activities like spaza shops or street traders, these pavement economies are fueled by the support of the community and an owner's aspirations to make something for themselves, to make more of their situation, and that's something we should always keep in mind. It's self-sufficiency. What are the means that the person has to create opportunities? So, until next time.